Matt Canavan, Resources and Northern Australia Minister, joining me from our Darwin studio. Thanks very much for your time today, Matthew Canavan. You got some headlines yesterday. You issued a bit of a challenge for Anthony Albanese. He's given one back to you, and in fact, I think we've got that in the system. I'll just play that to you first of all.
What I want to hear Matt Canavan say is to complete the sentence. There'll be a new coal-fired power station subsidised by the government I'm a minister in at X location. That's what I want to hear from Matt Canavan. He talks a big game, but he's actually a government minister. It's about time that Matt Canavan did his day job.
Eventually. So, Matt Canavan, that's the challenge for you from the opposition leader, whether you can say that about a new coal-fired power plant. Are you able to?
Well, I don't think Mr Albanese really understands the policy of the federal government. We are investing and backing and supporting an upgrade to a coal-fired power station at Vale Point that's on the shortlist for the Underwriting New Generation Investment Scheme. There is a proposal to build one in North Queensland as well at Collinsville. Now, there's more work that needs to be done on that. We've always said that at the election. We said we'd fund a further feasibility study. We've got to go through those steps. But we're willing to back the use of our coal here in Australia. The great inconsistency in the Labor Party's argument here is apparently Albo's come to regional Queensland and said he now supports the export of coal to overseas, not potentially Adani, but maybe other mines exporting coal. It's okay to do that, but it's just not okay to use the coal here in Australia for our own benefit, create jobs here. It's an Australia last proposal, an Australian last policy from the Labor Party, that somehow it's okay for other countries to use our resources, but not our own. Why wouldn't you back jobs in Australia?
The Vale Point upgrade you mentioned, that's not announced, is it? Is that actually happening, or is that still just on a short list?
There's 12 projects we identified before the election that are on a short list that are going through a process. They've got to go through a proper process, of course. We're not irresponsible here with the Labor Party. We don't just throw money around before looking at things. But we've got a number of projects, not just coal, it's gas, it's pumped hydro. We're willing to invest in all types of energy. And that's what we need to keep jobs here, particularly manufacturing jobs. And what I think, Anthony's tour this week has unfortunately shown is that they're trying to cover up here. Labor Party, we're not mugs in North Queensland, we know what they're doing. They're trying to cover their backsides after they got smacked at the election 200 days ago. And now saying, oh, we support the coal industry. But Anthony Albanese has been exposed to be the Hulk Hogan of Australian politics here, because he only pretends to fight. He's only pretending to fight for the coal industry. He doesn't really fight for the coal industry because he's not fighting against the Greens on issues like Adani. He's not fighting against those who want to shut down coal-fired power in this country. Indeed, he's celebrating the continuing closure of coal-fired power. And if that happens, if the coal-fired power stations go in North Queensland and Central Queensland, we won't have an aluminium industry, we won't have a copper refining industry, and we'll lose thousands of manufacturing jobs, the very jobs the Labor Party purports to fight for.
So on Vale Point, though, that's still not at the announcement stage. It's not over the line. The process has to play out, so it won't necessarily happen, that upgrade.
Of course it does, yeah. Yeah, of course it does.
Okay.
As I say, we don't just jump into things. We don't look before we leap. We're going to look at it properly. And,
sure,
and that's
just want to clarify that.
As is all the other projects.
And Collinsville, is there going to be a feasibility study helped paid for by the government necessarily?
Well, that's what yes, there will be, because we promised that at the election. Of course, we'll keep our promises. Now we're looking at the broader energy needs.
But has that been committed to yet, or is that just an election promise that will be committed to? I mean, is there funding announced or anything?
Yeah, look, the precise terms of the study have not been finalised, but that's being worked through at the moment. Right. But it's an election promise that, of course, will be kept.
Right. So would we expect an announcement on that soon?
Look, I would expect so. It's not in my portfolio, but I know the progress of discussions are going very well, and I'm pretty sure pretty soon we'll see some further progress.
Okay. Do you think, looking at a longer term focus, and this might be whatever you want long term to mean it can, 10, 20, 30 years, that Australia needs a plan to transition from coal?
No, I don't, Tom. I think that word transition has been used by the Labor Party as a cover for trying to put people out of a job. For the foreseeable future, and certainly the timeframes you've mentioned, we are going to need lots of different sources of power, including coal. The world will continue to use coal over that period, and there's no reason why we shouldn't too, to protect jobs here. What's important is we manage everything sensibly in our economy. We manage the environment, we manage our jobs and our economy, all with a degree of balance. And if you want to keep manufacturing jobs in this country, you need baseload power. Now, we don't have, unfortunately, at this stage, abundant sources of gas. We do have abundant sources of coal that the rest of the world uses, and we should be using those to protect jobs in this country.
So on that, so if we go to the sort of the longest one, I guess 30 years. I mean, at the moment, coal is the biggest earner in Australia's budget. The expectation is that that probably won't be the case in 30 years, isn't it?
No, it's not, Tom. In fact, it was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, the International Energy Agency put out projections showing that the Australian coal production is expected to rise to 2040, which is the longest they project these out things by. I mean, I think once you start going past 2040, you know, who knows, right? I mean, it is a long way away. But the expectation is that Australian coal will continue to grow. Now, the reasons for that is when you drill down into the facts here, you see very clearly why that's the case. Our coal is very high quality. It particularly has low ash, so it leads to less or fewer particulate emissions, the smog you see in many cities across Asia. And so those countries in Asia are increasingly demanding that high quality coal, particularly as they grow and develop and can afford the high quality sources of fuel. So Australia produces about 5% of the world's thermal coal. The IEA is predicting a slight reduction in global coal usage, but they're expecting an increase in Australia's market share because we've got the high quality product. So we're in a very strong position. We've got a very strong coal industry, and that's what frustrates so many people in Central and North Queensland and the Hunter Valley. We've got a lot of people who like to travel up from down south who have no idea about coal markets, never probably touched a piece of coal in their life, trying to lecture people about global markets. And when the Labor Party buys into that, as they continue to do, they're deserting the jobs of people they're meant to represent.
The other side of that, though, is projections around the IPCC and recommendations about when coal should be all but phased out as a power source, at least, notwithstanding at the moment it's by far the best way to produce iron, of course, or steel. If we still are using a lot of coal in 2040, we're going to well and truly miss 1.5 and 2 degrees global warming as the cap, aren't we?
No, not necessarily either, because the other thing the IEA shows strongly is what we do need to develop is broader technologies to lower carbon emissions of all types of electricity production and energy production broadly, including the use of carbon capture and storage, the advancement of coal-fired power technologies. We've seen amazing advances in the last decade with the emergence of high-efficiency, low-emission coal-fired power stations that have allowed the emissions from old coal-fired power stations to be reduced by about a quarter, sometimes higher, depending on the age of the
so does the
and in the future
the longevity of coal depend on that carbon capture and storage continuing to improve from the sort of standard it's got to at the moment?
Look, the longevity of any electricity production source will depend on its competitiveness, right? And that's where, you know, I don't think we should be making too many set predictions. That's what I have a problem with on the words transition, as you say, because that locks you in to say, oh, well, it's definitely going to go. Well, how do you know what technologies will exist? What we should do as a government is set the broad parameters as possible to allow the cheapest source of power to protect our jobs, to lower costs of living, and to provide continuing development for our nation. Now, technologies will change over time, and that leads to disruption. When that happens, governments do come in and help and assist, as they should do, but they shouldn't try and pre-plan for it or expect jobs to be lost. We should be trying to fight for our jobs, and that's what Anthony Albanese is saying. He's not fighting for our jobs in Central Queensland.
I guess, look, a government can have a plan B, but anyway, I take your point about it not necessarily going one way or the other. I wanted to ask you finally about Malcolm Turnbull on climate, weighing in again last night. He says the issue was for him that some in the LNP don't subscribe to man-made climate change. Is it true there are some in the coalition that are quite sceptical?
Look, I for health reasons, Tom, I don't watch Q&A anymore. I got pretty frustrated, so I didn't see Malcolm. I don't know, I'd have to see his comments in context. The Liberal National Party and Liberal National governments have had committed policies and plans to reduce carbon emissions for the whole length of this government. They had them during the Howard government as well. We stand by our record.
But some of your colleagues,
doing that,
particularly behind the scenes, are pretty sceptical, aren't they? That's a fair comment.
Look, well, I'm not. We also don't run a thought police in the Liberal National Party either. I mean, people are welcome to have their own views on issues, and we should have a proper and robust debate. I mean, what has anyone got to worry about people putting ideas? And if they're silly ideas, they'll be rejected. And what people I think will judge us on and do judge us on as a government is what we do, not what individual members of the government say. And what we do is we're reducing our carbon emissions. We're committed to doing so in partnership with other countries around the world. We've overachieved on our reductions of carbon emissions under the Kyoto Agreement, and despite all the cynicism and scepticism, I'm confident we'll continue to meet our targets on Paris just as we've done in the past too.
Well, just on that, so Australia is using this much spoken about Kyoto carryover. It's set to be a big battleground in Madrid. We have had other countries give up theirs from the first Kyoto period: Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden and the UK. Why not Australia?
Well, I mean, well, number one, it's not inconsistent with the Paris Agreement for us to take this action, so let's start with that.
Well, the rules haven't really been set there, that's the debate. But other countries have given up their achievement and Australia isn't. Have we ever heard why we won't?
Well, as I said, not inconsistent, and I was going to say move on as well. Number two, on the substantive point, I think it's better to have a system involved which encourages countries to overachieve and provide them with an encouragement to do so. So by having a system that allows for the carryover, of course, encourages countries to go further than they've committed, earlier than they committed. And I think that's a good system. So, look, those discussions will take place in Madrid, and obviously other countries are free to have their own views, but the Australian government's view, I think, is a very reasonable one, and it's one we've been committed to for some time.
Even though it's important to mention our first overachievement, and we got it, I think, 128 million carryovers from our first overachievement, when our target was to only increase by 8%, when other countries were decreasing. So that's part of the context as well.
Look, I'd have to check the figures there. You're starting to lose me a little bit there, Tom, but the key issue here is that right now, the time I've been in the Ministry in government, we have overachieved on our targets by something like 400 million tonnes. It's a great result, and we'll continue to work hard to meet our commitments, and hopefully other countries will too.
Matt Canavan, always appreciate your time. Thank you.